Something is different about the air today, and if you've been paying attention to the quality of the last several days, you already feel it. Not dramatically different, not the kind of different that arrives with a crash or a visible rupture. It is more subtle than that. The way a room feels different after someone has just left it. The particular texture of an atmosphere that has just come through something and is still holding the shape of what passed through it. April 21st, 2026 carries that quality. The charged air of a sky that has just delivered something enormous and has not yet fully exhaled. You are reading this in the wake, and the wake, in this case, is not quiet. Over the last several days, something genuinely rare assembled itself in the skies above us. Saturn, Mars, and Mercury all converged in Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, the sign of the self, of initiation, of the willingness to begin before you know how the story ends. 3 planets of radically different speeds and temperaments arrived at nearly the same degree in the same sign within a window of hours. The thinking mind, the driving will, and the structure of consequence all fused into a single fiery point. And the solar eclipse at 27 degrees of Aries 4 days ago had already seeded the ground where this stellium would land. The eclipse cracked something open. The stellium drew the current through the crack. Today, April 21st, the exact conjunctions are separating. The planets are beginning to pull apart from one another. Mercury moving ahead, Mars holding its ground, Saturn settling into the degrees it will occupy as it approaches its retrograde shadow, which it entered officially yesterday. But separating does not mean gone. The current that ran through that stellium is still moving through you. The question this day is asking is not whether the energy happened. It is what you are going to do with the fact that it did. And simultaneously, something else has arrived. The moon entered Cancer this morning. Jupiter has been sitting in Cancer all year, patient and expansive, holding the emotional intelligence of that sign at a magnified volume. Today the moon reaches Jupiter. These 2 bodies meeting in Cancer while the Aries stellium still hums in the background creates one of the more interesting tensions of this entire week. Fire is still burning in the sky, and the water of Cancer is not trying to extinguish it. It is trying to give it a place to be held. That is the essential tension of April 21st. What do you do with the fire that has moved through you when the world asks you to feel something first? Your soul arrived in this lifetime carrying a specific map. Your birth chart is that map, and a reading built from the exact moment and place of your birth decodes your sun, moon, and rising. Dives deep into your soul's focus area in love, career, or spiritual path, surfaces hidden karmic patterns, and delivers a month-by-month forecast for 2026 as a personal audio reading and a detailed PDF report sent to your inbox within 48 hours. The link is below. There is a specific kind of astrological event that most people talk about before it happens, and then, once it has passed, treat as though it is already over. The triple conjunction of Mercury, Mars, and Saturn in Aries that peaked yesterday and the day before is being treated this way in most places. The aspect was exact, the window has closed, move on. But that is not how planetary conjunctions actually work inside a human being. Particularly not conjunctions of this specific combination of bodies, in this specific sign, in the aftermath of a solar eclipse that planted its seed at the very degree where Chiron has been sitting all year. Let us understand what actually converged. Mercury is the planet of the mind, of perception, of the particular way you process the world around you and translate that processing into language, decision, and direction. Mercury in Aries is not the Mercury of careful deliberation and measured response. In Aries, Mercury operates at speed. It reaches its conclusions by moving toward them rather than sitting around them. It says the thing before it has finished constructing the argument, because in Aries the instinct is trusted more than the fully formed case. Mercury in Aries can be abrupt, and it can be brilliant, often simultaneously. Mars is the planet of will, of the drive to act, of the raw force that turns intention into movement. Mars entered Aries on April 9th, and it has been in its home sign, moving through its own territory with the full authority of a planet that owns the ground it is walking on. Mars in Aries is unfiltered. It does not apologize for wanting what it wants or for moving in the direction of what it wants, with more directness than the world around it might be prepared for. Mars in Aries is the original impulse before it has learned to moderate itself for the comfort of others. Saturn is the planet of consequence, of structure, of the reality principle. Saturn does not traffic in wishes or vague intentions. It deals in what you actually build with your actual choices over actual time. In Aries, Saturn has been doing something quietly significant all year. It has been pressing the first house energy of Aries, the territory of the self and of the beginning, against the reality of what a beginning actually requires. Not inspiration alone, not courage alone. The willingness to show up consistently for what you have decided you are starting. When these three bodies occupied the same degrees of Aries simultaneously, what you had was a moment when the mind, the will, and the structure of consequence were all speaking at once and speaking in the language of fire and beginning and the uncompromising present tense. If you felt in the last several days that something within you was under tremendous pressure, that an old story about what you were capable of or what you were allowed to pursue or how honest you were permitted to be was being pressed against its limits, you were experiencing this conjunction from the inside. The Sabian symbol for 8 degrees of Aries, the degree where Mercury met both Mars and Saturn, is the image of a large hat with streamers flying, facing east. East is the direction of sunrise, of the new thing arriving. The streamers flying suggest movement, celebration, something in motion before the destination is fully visible. This is not the symbol of a careful plan arriving at its careful conclusion. This is the symbol of someone already moving, already committed, already oriented toward the horizon before the full route is mapped. That is what the Stellium was asking of you, not readiness in the conventional sense. Orientation. The decision to face the east even before the sun has risen all the way. And now you're on the other side of the peak. And the question is the same one that follows every moment of genuine internal pressure. What did it move in you, and where is that movement going? The answer is not in the sky today. The sky today is doing something different, something that creates the container for you to actually feel what moved. The Cancer moon conjunct Jupiter is not the site of the stellium's resolution. It is the site of its integration. The place where what burned through you gets to be felt rather than just endured. There is a difference between enduring and integrating. Enduring is the act of getting through. You stay standing, you keep functioning, you move through the days of pressure without collapsing. That is not nothing. That takes real capacity. But enduring alone leaves the energy of what passed through you unprocessed, sitting in the body, in the chest, in the unasked questions of 2 in the morning. Integration is what happens when you actually make contact with what moved through you. When you feel it rather than simply surviving it. When you let the meaning of what the last several days pressed against inside you arrive in your full and unguarded awareness. The Cancer moon conjunct Jupiter is the sky's invitation to do that today. To stop moving at Aries speed for long enough to feel what the Aries fire has been burning through. And Saturn entering its retrograde shadow yesterday is relevant here as well. When a planet enters its retrograde shadow, it is beginning to approach the territory it will eventually retrace. Saturn will turn retrograde on July 26th of this year at 14 degrees of Aries. Between now and then, Saturn will move through the degrees it is currently occupying all the way to 14 degrees, and then it will retrace every one of those degrees again as it moves backward through them. What this means practically is that the themes Saturn has been pressing on in Aries, the themes of disciplined beginning, of structure applied to the self, of the long consequence of your choices about who you are choosing to be, those themes are not finished. They are entering a phase of deepening. What Saturn demands during its shadow period is honesty. You do not need to have resolved anything yet. You simply need to be honest about where you are, because the retrograde will be asking you to revisit and reinforce whatever you build between now and July. Honest round holes, performed ground does not, so the ground is still shaking, not because the stellium is still exact, because the stellium did what conjunctions do, which is not pass through without a trace, but initiate a current that continues to run through everything it touched, including you. The moon entered Cancer in the early hours of April 21st, and whatever the sky was pressing on yesterday in terms of urgency and drive and the sharp edge of Mercury conjunct Mars, today the quality of the atmosphere shifts, not to the absence of the Aries fire because the stellium is still in the sky, still separating but still present. The shift is in what the day is asking you to do with that fire. Cancer is a water sign governed by the moon itself, the sign of emotional depth, of the interior life, of what is felt before it is spoken and understood, before it can be articulated. Cancer governs home in the deepest sense of that word, not the physical structure but the emotional condition of feeling that you are where you belong, that the world around you includes space for the vulnerable and undefended parts of you to exist without having to justify their presence. Jupiter in Cancer has been expanding everything this sign governs for the better part of a year. Jupiter amplifies. In Cancer, it amplifies the emotional intelligence that this sign carries, the capacity for genuine feeling, the instinct toward nurturance and protection, the knowledge that what connects human beings to each other is not logic, but the willingness to be affected. Jupiter in Cancer knows that the most significant things in a life are not the achievements or the visible accomplishments, but the quality of the emotional bonds through which those achievements find their meaning. When the moon reaches Jupiter in Cancer, both bodies are in the sign they are most comfortable in. The moon rules Cancer. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, meaning it operates at its fullest and most generous capacity here. A Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer is not a subtle event. It is expansive, warm, emotionally intelligent, and oriented toward what genuinely matters rather than what merely looks like it matters. But today, this conjunction is happening in a sky that still contains Mercury, Mars, and Saturn in Aries. The Aries energy and the Cancer energy are in a square relationship, meaning they pull against each other at a 90-degree angle. Squares are not malevolent. They are friction, and friction generates heat, and heat, in the right conditions, generates change. What the Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer is doing in the square with the Aries stellium is creating a productive tension between the fire of initiation and the water of feeling. The Aries side of this square is saying, you know what you need to do, you have felt it for days. The direction is clear, move. The Cancer side is saying, before you move, feel what this is asking of you. Not to delay the movement. To ensure the movement comes from somewhere real, somewhere with roots, somewhere that will still feel like the right direction, when the urgency of the fire has passed, and the slower, quieter consequences of the choice are what you are living with. This is not a contradiction, it is the full picture of what a genuine beginning requires. The fire that initiates is Aries. The depth that sustains is Cancer. You need both. There is also something specific about Jupiter in Cancer that deserves attention on this particular day. Jupiter in this sign is fundamentally about belonging, about the emotional intelligence to understand what you are actually part of, what your connections to other people and to your own emotional truth actually constitute, and how much of what you have been seeking in the outer world has always been available in the inner one. Jupiter in Cancer does not expand your ambitions in the conventional sense. It expands your capacity to feel at home in your own life, which is, in the end, a far more significant expansion. When the Cancer moon reaches Jupiter today, it is amplifying this question, where are you actually at home? Not where do you live? Where do you belong in the sense of belonging to yourself, to the people who genuinely know you, to the emotional reality of the life you are actually living rather than the one you are strategically constructing? The Aries stellium that just moved through you was pressing on your capacity to begin something real. The Cancer Moon-Jupiter conjunction today is pressing on whether what you are beginning is rooted in what you actually feel, rather than what you have decided you should feel. Those two things, the initiated movement and the felt rootedness, need to find each other. that today is the day the sky is asking them to. For each of the 12 signs, this conjunction lands in a different area of the chart, and the quality of what it is amplifying is therefore unique for each sign. But the fundamental question it is pressing on is the same for all 12. Where is the emotional truth of this moment, and are you willing to actually feel it rather than simply manage it? Aries is feeling the Cancer moon and Jupiter pull against the relentless momentum of a sky that has been exclusively about their own self-generation. Something being asked of you emotionally right now is not a distraction from the beginning you are making. It is part of the foundation that beginning requires. Taurus is feeling this conjunction in the territory of communication and daily exchange. Something in the conversations of the last several days may have been marked by the sharp edge of the Aries stellium. The Cancer moon is asking whether the full emotional truth has been spoken, or only the efficient version. Gemini is feeling this in the territory of worth and resources, an emotional dimension of the question that Gemini's intellectual approach can sometimes bypass. With Uranus approaching Gemini in just a few days, what you feel about your own value matters more than what you can argue for it. Cancer is experiencing this as a direct amplification of identity and self-recognition. The Moon and Jupiter, both in your own sign, pressing on the question of who you are beneath the performance of who you have been. The Aries stellium squaring from your career house creates friction between emotional truth and worldly demand. Both deserve an honest answer. Leo is feeling this in the private interior, the 12th house dimension that is not naturally comfortable for a sign oriented toward visibility and expression. Something has been gathering in the quiet spaces that the Aries fire moved through without stopping to examine. Today is the day to stop and look. Virgo is feeling this in the territory of community and friendship, the warmth of genuine belonging pressing against the analytical and at times self-critical patterns that the Aries stellium in Virgo's 8th house has been activating. Something your people are offering you today is worth receiving without turning it immediately into a task. Libra is feeling this in the career and public standing dimension, an emotional quality arriving into professional territory that usually feels more rational than felt. The relational pressures of the Aries stellium in Libra's 7th house are informing the professional expansion in ways worth acknowledging directly. Scorpio is feeling this as an emotional hunger for meaning, the 9th house question of what your life is actually pointing toward arriving with the warmth of Jupiter's amplification. The practical discipline of the 6th house Aries stellium and the philosophical reach of the 9th are in productive friction. Both are true. Sagittarius is feeling this in the depth territory, the 8th house dimension that exists below the optimism and forward motion of Jupiter's ruling sign. Something that has been transforming quietly beneath the surface is asking for emotional acknowledgement before the next expansion moves past it. Capricorn is feeling this in the territory of partnership, Jupiter expanding the emotional intelligence of Capricorn's most significant relationships, while the Aries stellium in the 4th house presses on the private emotional foundation. What you feel at home is informing what you are capable of offering to the people closest to you. Aquarius is feeling this in the daily life and body dimension, an emotional tenderness toward the physical self that the urgent mental activity of the Aries stellium in Aquarius's 3rd house has been moving past. The body has been holding the energy of this week. Today is the day to notice what it has been carrying. Pisces is feeling this as an amplification of creative possibility and genuine joy, the 5th house dimension of life that exists for its own sake, receiving Jupiter's warmth through the Cancer moon. The tension with the Aries stellium in Pisces' 2nd house is between abundance and the fear that you do not deserve it. The Cancer moon says otherwise. There is a particular word that gets used in astrology and frequently misunderstood: retrograde. The misunderstanding runs in two directions. The first is panic, the assumption that a retrograde planet means a period of universal malfunction where nothing can be started, finished, or trusted. The second is dismissal, the assumption that it is simply an optical illusion with no significance in the lived experience of a life. Neither of these is accurate. Saturn entered its retrograde shadow yesterday, April 20th, at 7 degrees and 56 minutes of Aries. What this means is that Saturn is now moving through degrees it will retrace. Between now and July 26th, when Saturn stations retrograde at 14 degrees of Aries, every degree Saturn advances in the forward direction will be a degree it revisits on the way back. The shadow is the advance notice, the universe marking the territory about to receive sustained and deepened attention. When Saturn moves direct, it presses forward through new territory, applying its tests and demands progressively. When it turns retrograde, it returns to ground already warped and asks a more penetrating question than it asked the first time. Not what did you build here, but what is it actually made of? Not what did you decide here, but was that decision honest? Saturn in Aries has been asking all year what you are actually starting, and whether you are starting it from authentic desire or from the performance of desire. It does not ask unkindly. It asks the way reality asks, by waiting, by watching, and eventually by showing you the answer regardless of whether you found it first through reflection or through consequence. The retrograde shadow means the stakes of that question are rising, not to punish you, to give you time. The Aries stellium that just passed was a concentrated version of this same pressure. 3 planets asking simultaneously whether this is real, whether the beginning is rooted in something that will hold when the urgency of the fire passes. Now Saturn is moving into its shadow, and the question continues at a slower, deeper pace. What remains after the stellium's urgency is the more sustained inquiry of a planet approaching its reversal. And the quality of the tension that requires is not the speed and fire of Aries at its most combustive. It is the Cancer moon quality of feeling your way into an honest relationship with what is actually true. This is why the sky on April 21st forms such a coherent whole. The stellium supplied the fire and concentrated urgency. Saturn entering its shadow signals that the pressure will deepen and slow rather than simply pass. And the Cancer moon conjunct Jupiter supplies the emotional intelligence needed to actually feel your way into an honest reckoning with what the pressure has been revealing. The Sabian symbol at 8 degrees of Aries, where Saturn sits in its shadow, is the same image that held the stellium, a large hat with streamers flying. Facing east, the orientation toward the new thing. But Saturn in its retrograde shadow gives this image a different weight than Mercury and Mars did. Saturn is asking you to ensure that the east you are facing is your own east, not the east that looks right from the outside, not the east you committed to before you knew who you actually were, the east of your most honest beginning. And the shadow now entering is, in the kindest and most useful sense of the word, the test of whether what you are facing is real. There is a particular quality of this week that deserves to be named before this transmission ends. What you are experiencing right now, the combination of a recent solar eclipse seeding a new cycle in Aries, a triple conjunction of Mercury, Mars and Saturn burning through the early degrees of that sign, the Sun crossing into Taurus beginning the quieter season of consolidation, and the Cancer moon reaching Jupiter in a square to the Aries fire. This is not an ordinary astrological week. It is a week that concentrated several months' worth of thematic development into a single intense corridor of days. What that means for you practically is this: the sense that a great deal has happened in very little time is accurate. The sense that you are processing more than one thing simultaneously is accurate. The sense that some part of you has moved in a direction that has not yet been fully named or understood is accurate. The ground is still shaking, not because something is wrong, but because something that significant takes time to settle. For Aries, what you are carrying right now is the particular weight of having been the protagonist of a week that demanded everything at once. The eclipse in your sign, the stellium in your sign, Saturn pressing on your identity and what you are allowed to become. The Cancer moon in your 4th house today presses on the private emotional foundation of all of this. The question for Aries is not whether you have the courage to begin. You have demonstrated that. The question is whether the beginning is anchored to something genuine in the interior rather than only the exterior of your ambitions. For Taurus, the quality of having just crossed into your own season after extraordinary Aries intensity is distinct. The Sun is in your sign, Venus is in your sign. The world is asking you to slow down, to inhabit the sensory reality of the present moment, to trust that the ground is solid. The Cancer moon in your third house today brings warmth to the conversations closest to you. Someone near you needs your gentleness more than your productivity today. For Gemini, you are carrying the anticipation of Uranus arriving in your sign in just 4 days. Everything in the sky right now is moving toward that threshold. The Aries stellium has been sharpening your communication and willingness to say difficult, true things. The Cancer moon in your second house today is asking what you believe you deserve, and whether that belief is rooted in feeling or in an old story you inherited from circumstances you did not choose. For Cancer, the Moon and Jupiter, both in your sign on the same day, amplify your most essential nature, while the Aries sky fires press on your career direction from the square. This is a day of genuine emotional richness for Cancer, not uncomplicated richness, but the kind with weight and meaning. Something about who you are in. The private interior is speaking more loudly than it has in some time. Let it speak. For Leo, this was not a week that gave the spotlight to your sign. The Cancer moon in your 12th house today is not asking for visibility. It is asking for rest, for the quiet acknowledgement of what you feel when nobody is watching, for the particular courage of being genuine in the private rather than the public dimension of your experience. For Virgo, you are carrying the aftermath of the week that pressed hard on your relationship to control. The Aries stellium in your 8th house is not comfortable for a sign that prefers to understand before it commits. The Cancer moon in your 11th house today brings warmth to friendship and community. The people who know you genuinely are available in ways that may feel unexpectedly comforting if you let them be. For Libra, you are carrying the relational aftershock of the Aries stellium in your 7th house. Significant relationships may have felt unusually pressured or honest in the last several days. The Cancer moon in your 10th house today brings emotional intelligence to professional matters. Something about your career carries a feeling quality worth paying attention to rather than simply managing. For Scorpio, the gap between the daily reality of how you are spending your time and the larger sense of what your time is for has been unusually visible this week. The Aries stellium in your 6th house and the Cancer moon and Jupiter in your 9th house are in productive friction. Today is a day to feel that gap honestly before strategizing how to close it. For Sagittarius, you are carrying the productive friction of Jupiter, your ruling planet, being in Cancer and amplifying emotional depth, while your most natural instinct is always toward the horizon. The Cancer moon reaching Jupiter in your 8th house today is pressing on transformation that exists beneath the forward motion. Something wants to be felt more slowly before the next expansion moves past it. For Capricorn, Saturn, your ruling planet, has just been part of a triple conjunction while simultaneously entering its retrograde shadow. This is a concentrated Saturn event. The Cancer moon in your 7th house today brings emotional warmth to your most significant relationship. The quality of that relationship is, in ways, the external reflection of the internal work Saturn is asking of you. For Aquarius, you are carrying the awareness of Uranus approaching your 3rd house through Gemini in just 4 days. The Aries stellium in your 3rd house has already been activating this territory with sharp communication and urgent mental activity. The Cancer moon in your 6th house today is asking you to care for the body and daily rhythms with the gentleness that urgency often forgets. For Pisces, the Cancer moon reaching Jupiter in your 5th house is one of the more beautiful placements of the week for your sign, a genuine opening in the territory of creative life and authentic pleasure. The Aries stellium in your 2nd house has been pressing on worth and resource in its most direct form. Today, the Cancer moon offers something different, the expansive warmth of the 5th, the reminder that what makes your life worth its resources is the quality of what you actually feel and create and love within it. The ground is still shaking. It will continue to for some time, because what passed through the sky in the days around the eclipse and the stellium was not a small event. It was the kind of astrological week that leaves marks in the calendar of a life. Not scars, marks. The kind you look back at years from now and say something genuinely shifted there. Something whose consequences turned out to be better than expected because the direction the sky pressed you toward was the right one, even though it was not the comfortable one. You are not being asked to have resolved anything today. You are being asked to stay in honest contact with what the last several days have moved in you, to let the Cancer moon give you access to the feeling of it, not just the thinking of it. To let Jupiter expand your emotional intelligence around what this chapter is actually asking of you, with generosity toward yourself and toward the people who are in this chapter alongside you. And Saturn, moving through its shadow, carrying the image of streamers flying toward the east, will ensure that the honesty you bring to this moment becomes the foundation of what comes next. Not through force, through the patient reality of consequence, which is Saturn's truest nature, which is not punishment but the reliable return of what you genuinely invested. The ground is shaking. Stand on it anyway. Feel what it is shaking loose. That is the work of April 21st, 2026. If this message found you at the right moment, leave a comment below and subscribe to the channel. The sky continues to move through remarkable configurations as Taurus season deepens and Uranus arrives in Gemini at the end of this week. Stay close for what comes next.